Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. The Pakistan Army says a soldier has been martyred in India's unprovoked fighting in Diva sector along the line of control. The military's media wing said Pakistani troops responded promptly and inflicted heavy losses on the enemy. In a separate incident, 3 Pakistani soldiers have been martyred in an exchange of fire with terrorists in North Waziristan. According to military's media wing, security forces killed 2 militants during raids on their hideouts. Britain has asked India to lift all restrictions in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, responding to a debate on the political situation in Kashmir in the Westminster Hall of Parliament. Minister for Asia, Nigel Adams, said the situation in Kashmir is of great concern to his government. He added that the Kashmir dispute should be resolved according to the wishes of Kashmiri people. Condemning the Indian atrocities, MPs said Kashmiri women are being harassed and molested at the hands of Indian troops. The United Arab Emirates has ratified the visa exemption agreement with Israel. In a statement, Israel's foreign ministry said now its citizens can visit the UAE without a visa. It added the agreement will come into force within 30 days. Global daily deaths from COVID-19 have passed 17,000 for the first time as the toll approaches 2 million with over 92 million infections. China has reported its first COVID-19 related death in over 8 months, while its daily cases also reached the highest levels since July. Meanwhile, the US death tally has crossed 384,000, while its caseload has surpassed 23 million. Pakistan has registered over 3,000 new cases and 46 deaths overnight as its death toll tops 10,800. And in cricket, England trailed Sri Lanka by 8 runs on the first day of the opening test at the Galle International Stadium. The visitors ended day 1 on 127 for 2 after bowling Sri Lanka out for only 135. England's Dom Bess took 5 wickets, while skipper Joe Root struck a 50 to put his side in a commanding position. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. The Pakistan Army says a soldier has been martyred in India's unprovoked fighting in Diva sector along the line of control. The military's media wing said Pakistani troops responded promptly and inflicted heavy losses on the enemy. Indian forces have committed nearly 40 ceasefire violations since the start of this year. Islamabad has repeatedly asked the international community to take notice of India's aggression. In a separate incident, 3 Pakistani soldiers have been martyred in an exchange of fire with terrorists in North Waziristan. According to military's media wing, security forces killed 2 terrorists during raids on militant hideouts. It said an IED expert was among the terrorists killed in the operations. Pakistan has repeatedly pointed to India's involvement in terrorist activities in Balochistan and other areas of the country. It has earlier presented a dossier containing details of India's state sponsorship of terrorism. Britain has asked India to lift all restrictions in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. UK's Minister for Asia, Nigel Adams, said this while responding to a debate on Kashmir in the Westminster Hall of Parliament. Nigel Adams said the situation in Kashmir is of great concern to his government. He added that the dispute must be resolved according to the wishes of Kashmiris. 10 lawmakers from the Conservative and the Labour Party also condemned India's human rights violations in the occupied valley. They say Kashmiri women are being harassed and molested at the hands of Indian troops. They called for an independent probe into the extrajudicial killings of Muslims in the occupied valley. The MPs urged the international community to stop the systematic genocide of Kashmiris by Indian authorities. And for more on this, we are joined by Lord Wajid Khan, a British lawmaker. Thank you for your time at Indus News. Lord Khan, Indian actions in occupied Kashmir have drawn serious concerns from the British MPs, but there hasn't been any sort of a practical measure against India in this regard. So can we expect the international community, particularly the UK, to do something about it?
Yeah, well, firstly, I welcome the debate on Kashmir in the House of Commons yesterday, and it was really heartening to see the majority of MPs across the political divide condemning the lockdown in Indian administered Kashmir. And there was the odd one person who was unfortunately blinded by what's actually happening, but that is what happens sometimes. But overall, the minister got a very strong message back from MPs that there's huge amount of concern with what's happening in Kashmir, and we have a lockdown here in Eastern Europe, so Western Europe and other parts of the European continent. However, the lockdown in Kashmir since August 2019 is of a different nature, severe nature, and it just adds that human rights abuses are increasing there. Of course, there should be them strict measures, and I think it's right for the minister to go away and our Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab to raise these issues with his counterparts in India. And this is what it's about. There's nobody here, anti-India or pro-particular country. This is just an anti-human rights abuses agenda. Wherever you have human rights abuses, you have to talk about them and speak against them, whether that be in Crimea, whether that be in China, whether that be in India, or wherever in the world. And I think that's what the government has to do its job now. They are the governing party. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, has got to raise these issues with his counterpart and say to the Indian government, look, we as a universal human rights, we do care about what happens in India, and it isn't about, it's our constitution. We can do what we want. We can blind children, rape women, and butcher people. That is not what should be going on. We should be saying to them, it's in India's interest, and it's for India's development to ensure that every one of its citizens is given the human rights and right to live in peace and prosperity, fundamental rights. And unfortunately, there have been some grave human rights abuses, and we don't know what's going on there because of the lockdown. And I think there has to be substantial lifting of these restrictions and normality in that part of the world. Well, I'm of the strong opinion the problem of Kashmir, unfortunately, originated from the UK. If you look at history and partition, there's a moral duty for British politicians to do whatever they can to ensure that Kashmiris, one, live life free from human rights abuses, and secondly, they can determine their future. That is the fundamental kind of way of making sure that we can bring justice to the area. There will be no peace between India and Pakistan unless there's justice for the Kashmiris, and the Kashmiri people are the main contestants. They have to be part of that conversation. There are lots of wonderful brothers and sisters I speak to in India who equally condemn what the government's doing, who are equally concerned about what's happening in Kashmir. So ultimately, yes, we have to do something. It's not, you can't just leave it to the United Kingdom alone. It has to be United Nations, international community, but the UK should be playing a big role. We shouldn't be looking at this as an area of trade and cooperation and opportunity for building your finances and businesses. It should be more about human rights. It's about lives. They always matter over money and trade. And I think the message, as that came from yesterday's debate, some really fantastic contributions from Member of Parliaments and told the Minister, go back, tell your Foreign Secretary and your Prime Minister, as a governing party, we do not stand for what's happening there. We are really concerned. The Kashmiri women, children are subject to huge human rights abuses. That cannot happen. So hopefully the message will go to government, and it's the government's duty now to have them conversation with their counterparts in India.
So Lord Khan, there has been a mention of the arms sales from the UK to India, worth £50 billion to India in the last 5 years particularly. So MPs fear those weapons will be used against the Kashmiris. Don't you think, shouldn't there be any cut on such arms sales?
I absolutely condemn the selling of weapons to India, and then unfortunately for the government to use them in parts in Kashmir. And it's just beyond belief that then we can give our international development money to people, like organizations that work in these areas. It's like bomb them and then we support them. That is ludicrous. The government needs to rethink that policy and not export the arms to be used in that particular way. I mean, I'm against war, I'm against arms exportation in generally anyway, but to them to use them on women and children is the worst of the worst in terms of behavior towards citizens of one country. And I think that was really well brought up by my colleague Naz Shah, MP for Bradford, and I think other colleagues brought that up. So that has to stop. We need to put an embargo for sales in areas in particular where they are committing human rights abuses against their population.
Lord Wajid Khan, a British lawmaker, thank you very much for talking to Indus News. Really appreciate that. And now moving on, in India, protesting farmers on tractor trolleys have started heading for New Delhi to participate in the massive January 26th Republic Day protest. Farmer leaders marked the folklore festival by lighting a massive fire by burning copies of the contentious new laws. Farmers in Punjab, Haryana and Delhi's Singhu border also burnt copies of the farm laws and chanted slogans against the Modi government. Around 250 million people are protesting the laws, saying the legislation makes them vulnerable to corporate exploitation. The next round of talks between the government and farmers' unions is scheduled for January 15th. Azerbaijan's Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov has reaffirmed his country's support to Pakistan on the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. He said this while meeting the Prime Minister Imran Khan in Islamabad. More in this report.
Azerbaijan's Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov is on a two-day visit to Pakistan. This is the first visit by an Azeri Foreign Minister to Islamabad since 2010. Bayramov called on Pakistan's top civil leadership to discuss a range of issues concerning the both sides. During his meeting with Prime Minister Imran Khan, he expressed solidarity with Kashmiris. The Foreign Minister said Baku will continue to stand by Islamabad on the issue of Kashmir at all international forums. He also thanked Pakistan for its support on the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh. Khan assured Bayramov of Pakistan's assistance in the reconstruction of recently liberated territories. The two sides also vowed to strengthen bilateral trade. Bayramov earlier held separate meetings with President Arif Alvi and Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi. This comes a day after Islamabad hosted a second round of trilateral moot between Pakistan, Turkey and Azerbaijan.
Saudi Arabia's Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan says Iran's interventions in the Middle East must stop. The Foreign Minister said this during a meeting with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Moscow. At a joint news conference, the Saudi minister said pro-Iran militias are obstructing a solution for the war in Syria. He also accused the Iran-aligned Houthi group of obstructing peace efforts in Yemen. Prince Faisal said the kingdom is pushing towards achieving stability in the region. Lavrov said Moscow supports the Saudi position in rejecting foreign interference in the region's issues. Additionally, the two sides discussed cooperation to stabilize oil prices within the OPEC Plus system. Iran says it is resuming its naval patrolling mission in the Red Sea. Iranian military commander Mohammad Hossein Bagheri said Tehran's naval vessels have been facing harassment in the sea. He said Tehran's armed forces will ensure the security of the country's tankers and commercial ships. He said Iran's defensive might in international waters is clearly visible. Iran also commissioned the country's largest ever military vessel during a two-day short-range missile drill. Recently, Iran has increased its military activities in the Persian Gulf amid tensions with the U.S. The United Arab Emirates has ratified the visa exemption agreement with Israel. In a statement, Israel's foreign ministry said citizens will now be able to visit the UAE without a visa. Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi said that ratification is a central element of the implementation of many agreements being worked on these days with the Emirates, Bahrain and Morocco. The visa-free agreement will go into effect on February 12. The UAE was originally expected to authorize the agreement in late December or early January, but deferred it. Israeli parliament ratified the visa waiver program for Emirati citizens in November last year. The Israeli army has detained 41 Palestinians from different parts of the occupied West Bank. In a statement, the Palestinian Prisoners Society said the arrests were made from the villages of Al-Mughayr and Kafr Malik in Ramallah. It said the number of arrests were the largest in a day since the start of the year. The body said the increase in COVID-19 infections among the Palestinian detainees has put their lives in a serious danger. Nearly 4,400 Palestinian political detainees are languishing in Israeli jails, including women and children. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The U.S. House of Representatives has impeached President Donald Trump over the Capitol Hill riots. Trump, charged with incitement of insurrection, has become the first U.S. president to be impeached twice. This report has more.
Stunned and angered at the Capitol insurrection, U.S. lawmakers lashed out at U.S. President Donald Trump, calling him white supremacist in chief and racist in chief. 10 Republicans joined the Democrats to vote to pass the impeachment motion 232 to 197. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi signed the enforcement of impeachment article.
That Donald Trump is a clear and present danger to our country, and that once again we honored our oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help us God.
Meanwhile, President Trump posted a video on Twitter which did not mention impeachment. Instead, his remarks were focused on Wednesday's Capitol violence, which triggered the incitement of insurrection charge against him. President Trump said he unequivocally condemned the last week's violence.
As I have said, the incursion of the U.S. Capitol struck at the very heart of our republic. It angered and appalled millions of Americans across the political spectrum. I want to be very clear. I unequivocally condemn the violence that we saw last week. Violence and vandalism have absolutely no place in our country and no place in our movement.
The vote was carried out in a large presence of armed National Guard members guarding the outside of the building. About 10,000 National Guard troops have streamed into Washington, D.C. ahead of Joe Biden's inauguration on January 20th. President Trump will now face a trial in GOP-led Senate where, if convicted, he could face being barred from holding the office ever again.
In central Mali, 3 UN peacekeepers have been killed and 6 wounded after their convoy hit a roadside bomb. In a statement, the United Nations said the soldiers then came under attack by unidentified gunmen in the Timbuktu region. It said the 3 dead peacekeepers belonged to Ivory Coast, while the Ivory Coast Army says the UN workers were attacked by extremists. But no group has claimed the responsibility for the attack so far. The UN mission in Mali has recorded 231 fatalities, making it the deadliest of the peacekeeping missions. Ethiopia says its army has killed 3 key leaders of the Tigray movement, including the country's former foreign minister, Seyum Mesfin. In a tweet, the government's emergency task force said the army also arrested 5 other party members. The 2 other killed leaders were former federal affairs ministers and ex-parliamentary chief. Earlier, Ethiopian forces killed 15 Tigray leaders and arrested 8, including former president of the region. Ethiopian police and military launched a manhunt for the leaders of Tigray People's Liberation Front after Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government declared victory over the movement in November after nearly a month of fighting. For the first time since the pandemic began, the world has reported more than 17,000 deaths in a single day. Globally, there are nearly 2 million fatalities and more than 92 million infections. China has reported its first virus-related death in 8 months, with daily cases at its highest since July. More in this report.
The coronavirus is now claiming more lives every day than at any other point since it emerged in December 2019. Health officials say there needs to be a balance between COVID-19 testing and vaccinations around the world. In the U.S., the White House has once again suggested the existence of more transmissible strains in a weekly report to states. The death toll in the U.S. has topped 384,000 with more than 23 million infections. Meanwhile, healthcare systems in Canada and Mexico are struggling to keep up with the surge in cases. Bolivia has signed a contract with India's Serum Institute for 5 million doses of the AstraZeneca's vaccine.
The vaccine is part of the comprehensive solution that we have against the pandemic that has been threatening the country since December 2019, and which in our country has generated a lot of tears, pain, many families who have lost loved ones because there were precisely no structural response. Today, the national government, working for the health of Bolivian men and women, guarantees the vaccine with this contract.
Turkey has also approved the Chinese Sinovac vaccine for emergency use, clearing the way for mass inoculations from today. In more bad news for the UK, a study has found that patients in England's intensive care units are 20% more likely to die. Meanwhile, the EU has warned that the Britain-linked variant is having a significant impact on other countries, and its spread must be stopped at all costs. The World Health Organization has called upon wealthy nations to help bridge gaps in global vaccine distribution.
Going into a second year of this, it could even be tougher, given the transmission dynamics and some of the issues that we're seeing. So we need to, really focus on taking the positives, looking at what's worked in every country, and then transferring that knowledge to others.
A WHO team has arrived in China's central city of Wuhan to investigate the origins of the pandemic. Meanwhile, Japan has widened its state of emergency to cover more than half of its population as hospitals face pressure.
In Pakistan, 46 people have lost their lives to COVID-19, while 3,097 have tested positive over the past 24 hours. This takes the country's death toll to 10,818. The Health Ministry says there are more than 33,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. The ministry said out of over 511,000 countrywide cases, more than 467,000 people have recovered. The ministry said over 230,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province. Punjab has reported over 147,000 cases. Pakistan's youngest Microsoft certified professional, Arfa Kareem Randhawa, is being remembered on her 9th death anniversary. Kareem gained the title of Microsoft engineer at the age of only 9 years in 2004. She represented Pakistan at various international forums and was also invited by Bill Gates to visit the Microsoft headquarters in the United States. The IT genius received many awards, including the Presidential Pride of Performance. She died of a cardiac arrest in 2012 at the age of 16. Pakistan's air chief says Pakistan and Turkey enjoy a unique and enviable relationship. In an interview to Turkish media, Air Chief Marshal Mujahid Anwar Khan said Turkey and Pakistan face common challenges. Khan noted that Pakistan supports the peace process in Afghanistan that will bring an end to the lingering war in the country. However, he said India wants to keep Afghanistan unstable and is behind all the sporadic terrorist activities in the country. Khan thanked Turkey for its support on the Kashmir issue at various international forums. He also reiterated Islamabad's support for Ankara on Cyprus and other regional issues. The air chief said Islamabad stands by Ankara in its fight against terrorism. Turkey has called on the United States to review its sanctions over the purchase of Russian S-400 defense systems. Defense Minister Hulusi Akar told reporters that Ankara wants to resolve the dispute through talks. He called on Washington to stop using threatening language and sanctions against Ankara. Akar said it is difficult for Turkey to back off from the point Ankara has come to on the purchase of the systems. He said Ankara had no choice but to acquire the Russian system after no NATO ally offered Turkey favorable terms. Akar also said talks with Russia on acquiring a second consignment of the S-400 were continuing. Greece has started forcing over 1,400 people to return from Lesbos and other Aegean islands to Turkey. Athens has called on Ankara to respect asylum agreements with the European Union. Greece's migration minister says Athens has submitted a request to the EU Commission for the return of the migrants. The move comes ahead of a planned resumption of the talks to resolve territorial disputes between Greece and Turkey. Thousands of migrants and refugees used Greece as their entry point to Europe through Turkey in 2015 and 16. Turkey hosts over 3 million refugees and migrants, while thousands are waiting in Greece for asylum applications to be processed. Cuba has criticized the Trump administration for deliberately affecting the future of bilateral relations. This comes after Washington announced it was returning Havana to its list of state sponsors of terrorism. Cuba's foreign ministry said it does not recognize qualifying lists of countries issued by the State Department. It said the lists were unilateral and lacked international recognition.
It is a deliberate purpose, and that is detected from the moment this qualification was pronounced against our country. We insist that it is a slander of an insult against Cuba, and that the Secretary of State deliberately lies when qualifying Cuba as a country sponsor of terrorism.
Ukraine says it will do everything in its power to hold accountable those accused of meddling in the U.S. election. The blacklisted include a parliamentarian, Alexander Dubinsky, from President Zelensky's ruling party. In a tweet, head of President Volodymyr Zelensky's office, Andriy Yermak, pledged to take action regardless of party affiliation. Earlier, the U.S. imposed sanctions on several Ukrainian individuals and entities alleging interference in the 2020 election. They were accused of involvement in a network associated with pro-Russian parliamentarian Andriy Derkach. In a statement, Derkach said those blacklisted were being punished for exposing alleged corruption. Climate activist Greta Thunberg is to feature on a set of stamps issued by Sweden's postal service. She will join a hall of fame of Swedish personalities, from footballer Zlatan Ibrahimovic to actress Greta Garbo. The stamps go on sale today and show Thunberg in her familiar yellow raincoat standing on a rocky coast looking out at a flock of birds. Postal authorities say they hope a small stamp can shine a light on the important issue of climate change. They say several million stamps will be issued, and there will be many Gretas swirling around. Other stamps in the collection also have an environmental theme, including depictions of mountains, lakes and forests. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In Australia, enthusiasts of adventure sports in eastern New South Wales state are taking a leap of faith, literally. Find out more in this report.
On a sunny summer afternoon, a dozen friends have gathered atop a cliff about 60 meters above the ocean near Currarong, a town in New South Wales. They are united in their passion for a stomach-churning adventure sport, specifically rope jumping. 24-year-old Daisy Allen, upon leaping, free falls most of the way down toward the ocean surface.
Definitely at the beginning, there's a lot of fear that comes up, like your amygdala, your survival brain is really kicking in, because you really, every part of you is trying to rationalize the safety aspect, because obviously you only jump because you know it's safe, right? So for me, it's a matter of just calming down, centering myself, really focusing in on my breathing, which is an aspect of this that I really love, because it really forces me into that state of mindfulness and pure awareness.
After the leap and ensuing swing, Allen was hauled back up the cliff face on the rope by her friends at the top. They work in unison, about half a dozen, pulling the line together to bring their friend back up from the abyss below.
It's mostly about the people, because I can go to a beautiful place so easily alone, but the people make the big difference for me and who's involved. It's like an informal tribe. and there's so much trust and faith put in each other, and everyone's going through hardship in some way, and sharing that, it's just special. I don't know, can't put any more words to that.
Rope-free flying or rope jumping was born in the 90s and grew in popularity in the past decade. In rope jumping, jumpers often install their ropes on cliffs, mountains, or skyscrapers, unlike the bungee jumping in which the jumper is connected to a large elastic cord.
And what's for dinner? Well, for most Europeans, the answer may be very soon, including worms, roasted, poached, fried, or served with a sunny side up. More in this report.
Mealworms may soon find their way into Europe's pasta bowls and dinner dishes after becoming the first insect approved in the region as human food. The decision by the European Food Safety Agency paves the way for the yellow grubs to be used whole and dried in curries and other recipes, and as a flour to make biscuits, pasta, and bread.
The panel concluded that it's safe to consume this insect species, this product, under the proposed uses and use levels. And of course, if in the future there is a different novel food produced using Tenebrio molitor, the yellow mealworm larvae, as as a source.
Rich in protein, fat, and fiber, they are likely to be the first of many insects to be featured on Europeans' plates in the coming years. The European Food Safety Agency says it has received 156 applications for novel food safety assessments since 2018. These cover everything from algae-derived foods to an array of insect species.
I think it's interesting to say that we have received so far dossiers on different insect species and also on different formulations made using those insect species. And let's see what is going to happen in the future. But speaking of the present, we have already received a lot of dossiers on insects as novel food.
People across much of the world, including parts of Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, already enjoy tucking into insect bars, cricket burgers, and other grub-based foods. Once the European Commission ratifies ESFA's endorsement, Europe will join them. Overcoming the yuck factor may take its time, however.
The music mixing scene is dominated by men in many Muslim countries, but Tunisian women are defying social pressures to make their mark in the world of turntables and electronic music. This report has the details.
The era of exclusion from electronic music is over for many women in Tunisia. They are now flocking to a local DJ academy to launch a career for themselves. The La Fabrique art studio empowers Tunisian girls to challenge gender stereotypes that only men can mix music.
Working as a women DJ in Tunisia has two sides, a bad side and a good side. Like all fields of work that we can say are for men. Most of the work is at night, and because it's a difficult field, it is not easy for women or even men sometimes to work at night in bars or nightclubs.
Students and teachers say working late, along with the lack of training resources, are some of the difficulties they have faced. To remedy that, the academy allows them to have a hands-on experience as well as training them in music mixing. Tunisian DJ and co-founder of the academy, Ulfa Arfawi, remains upbeat despite the challenges that lie ahead.
We launched a campaign of 16 DJs Against Violence, which was a digital festival broadcast on La Fabrique Art Studio's page. We wanted to give a voice to the artists of the academy to express their rejection of all forms of violence.
The issue of violence against women remains significant in Tunisia, despite a law passed in 2017 which punishes all forms of harassment. But Arfawi's efforts have created a safe space where girls can continue to hone their skills and learn new techniques.
And now the business updates. Wall Street stocks have opened slightly higher as traders await details on President-elect Joe Biden's proposals for stimulus. Investors have also digested worse than expected jobless claims data. The indices of S&P 500 and Dow Jones Industrial Average traded 0.25% higher, whereas Nasdaq Composite opened flat. Meanwhile, oil prices dropped on mounting coronavirus cases, fueling demand concerns. U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an order bolstering a November ban on U.S. investments in alleged Chinese military firms. The move aims at curbing Beijing's access to U.S. capital markets just days before Trump's exit. The amended directive requires U.S. investors to completely divest their holdings of securities of the banned firms. It expands the scope of initial executive order, which only barred investors from buying securities by that date. The order is part of Trump's bid to cement his tough on China legacy in the final days of his presidency. China's top chipmaker SMIC and oil giant CNOOC were among the 35 firms banned by the Defense Department.
A lot of good people during the course of the last almost.
And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.